Hello. No.
Good morning, President. We're planning to send us a cabinet meeting. Item 1 is the notice of recording. To advise the meeting, this will be webcast by live or and broadcast by the council's meeting at the June site. And that members of the press or public may record and take photographs except under a confidential or consent items. Item 2 is apologies. I've an apology from Chair Thompson and from Ian and friends from the forest substituting. Are there any others? Okay, no goes to apologies. Item 3 is declarations of interest. So there is interest here.
Yeah, it may be relevant later on. Non-pecuniary interest. I'm on the board of B Music Limited.
Who's that?
B Music Limited. B Color Music.
Okay, thank you.
Do I need to make declaration of interest? Sorry. But what's the thing for them? The next sentence, sorry, it's got up there.
The regen scheme.
No, the governance.
Music governance.
Yes, it was.
Board.
Okay. Okay, we'll note that. Anyone else? Okay, moving on then. Exempt information and possible exclusion of press and public. We have exempt appendices in respect of items 8, 10, 11, 12, 15 and 22. Does anybody wish to raise an item on those exempt appendices? Right.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question on both 11 and 12.
Okay, in which case then we will take 11 and 12, the end of the measures of the since that, what will happen then is we'll go into private session at the end of the meeting and then come back into private session to consider the recommendations. Yeah, thank you. Item 5 then is the customer service strategy and enhanced business and delivery program. Bridget.
Thank you. So this was the culmination of many months of work that we have in front of us today. The customer service strategy is not just about fixing contact centre or customer services team. This is a strategy for the whole organisation with all the line of touch points for customers. At the moment, we have accessible points of contact as an organisation. We have 265 websites, 200 contact numbers, 151 email addresses, and somehow 131 postal addresses still in operation. We are scattered as an organisation. It's very hard sometimes to work out how to get in contact with us, and we need to make that journey simpler for customers whilst driving service improvements. There's huge scope for using some of the tools that we already have to improve. So at the moment, only 21% of services are available through our Grow account, our customer portal. We need to move away from the excessive number of forms we've got online at the moment, move away from all the different services that ask you to put your details a million times and put things through Grow account where possible. And we need to make sure that wherever we're working with customers, we are measuring satisfaction and knowing how we can do better. At the moment, we only do that in 5% cases. There's been an extensive public consultation about principles behind this that's been going on over the last few months. We've also taken our cue from the pandemic. So thanks to the pandemic, we have seen 7 years worth of e-commerce growth in just the last 1 year. So the move to get online has been massive. That doesn't mean we only offer online for our citizens. We need to make it as easy as possible to interact with us online. The majority can get online, free up space and resource so they can't get online, contact us through contact centre or in person if needed. Very much not closing down those avenues. If we can shift as much traffic as possible self-service, we can free up a huge amount of resources there. It should be noted that previously would be the digital exclusion strategy through Cabinet as well. Those can't get online, it gets online. There's a huge amount of information in here from the findings of the consultation, the promises that we're making to customers. You've got an outline of the first steps for fixing some of this stuff included in there. And when it comes to the business case, there's been one of the things put together. We know that there'll be savings coming out from this. We've already identified 5.9 million worth. We know that there are a lot more savings that will come out of this. At the moment, it's hard to quantify. So at the moment, we budgeted 5.9 million to come out. But we know that as we talk through, there will be other efficiencies that tumble out at this point in time down on. So that's why we've got that figure that we do anticipate it will be higher. I think those are the main points. Very happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Lee. First of all, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, and I agree with Deputy Leader, there's huge scope for improvement here. Two points about this. One is, I think the report really highlights the problem, and that bar chart on satisfaction, 66% of residents are dissatisfied with the quality of service received from the City Council. So, firstly, the risk is that you streamline, you make things better in terms of the complaint service, but things are not improving beneath that. And that service has continued to deliver a poor service, even though complaints are handled more smoothly. We're seeing a bit of this at the moment, where there have been some changes to the complaint service, and we're seeing reports of huge delays in dealing with complaints and getting issues resolved. Secondly, a challenge there is whether this system will be able to flag up and hold departments accountable to deliver improvements when it shows that there are failures. And for instance, will it red flag if a resident calls 2 weeks in a row saying they've had their waste collection list, ensure that something gets done about it? Is that kind of real action which residents need to see to have a complaints and a customer service system they feel that works for them?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ian. Yeah, I think we're supportive of anything that makes things better for residents, and if it saves money as well, all well and good. There's a number of points that struck me when I read the report. Item 3.1, page 3, talks of expectations and talks about Amazon and Uber and sort of people interacting with them and using that as a benchmark. But I find myself really looking at it from a resident's eyes. We've got 32 wards that are on boundary of our council. Myself as a ward on the boundary, most of the residents, these council boundaries are fairly sort of well on them. They don't look across the road. To them, as their neighbours across the road, they don't think of it as a neighbouring council, and often they judge their services by what they see being delivered across the inside of the road. That's what they're comparing us to when people talk about. A good example is wheelie bins. When they see people picking up 2 wheelie bins across the road and being dragged in and being done that way around, and then they see the one outside their house is just having one wheelie bin taken at a time. They can see that different level of productivity, the speed that the crews are working, and that's just one example that came to mind. A lot of people see the different services going across the road. So I think that whilst Amazon and Uber is probably a more sort of exciting sort of example, I think sort of neighbouring councils sometimes is another one. John did well to point out what's on 3.1, page 5, at 67% of respondents are not happy with the quality of service. But I also noticed that 3.11 talks about 92% of respondents saying that BCC needs to change and how it improves services. 92%, that's fairly call to action by our residents. And item 6.1 talks about fixing the basics. And, the Comes administration speaking since 2012, and we rather hope that those bases have been covered. But as I say, we're supportive of anything that finds things that need to be replaced, and if things can be improved, we're supportive of that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. You can, of course, always improve services, so I'm not surprised by that statistic. Bridget, what's the respond?
Yeah, that's okay. So On the business satisfaction levels, I would shy away from pointing out where our customers aren't happy with us. If we don't know it's broken and we can't fix it, we've got to ask them, we've got to understand that, and we've got to go out there and fix those things. With the big example, I would say that's 1 out of 1,200 services that we run. So whilst you can look across the boundary and see a bin, you can't look across the boundary and see adult social care or work that children's social workers are doing. You can't look across the boundary and see how the economic department's functioning or so on. So whilst that is a very, very visible service, it's just one of the 1,200 that we run. And one of the tricks that we keep falling foul of is we keep focusing on those very visible services and thinking that they are total customer services, whereas actually we do have another sitting behind the scenes that we do need to get right. And that's where I think we've been falling down in the past. We focus on one or two of the front-facing ones. Actually, there's hundreds of things every day that our systems interact with us on. We need to make sure that all of them are up to speed. And at the moment, we know that a huge number of them sitting in the background just aren't where we need to be in terms of connectivity. We still have web forms, we have to put them on, physically sign them and then stick them in the post to come back to us. I mean, that's nuts. That's nuts even back in 2012. When, by the way, Uber and some of the other actually have data that exist. So things have moved on massively since we came into administration. There's been a huge amount of work going on throughout that time. The technology moves on, customer expectations move on. We have to be faced with that. Can the system hold departments accountable? Absolutely. So at the moment, only 5% of our services are asking our customers whether they're satisfied with what we do and whether they're happy with the services they're getting. There's 95% of services where we're in the dark on what our customers think about the service they're getting. So there's a huge scope for that for getting information in a bit on thanks. I think that's just about everything. I'll pass back to you, Leader.
Thanks very much, Brilliant. In which case, there are no further comments on agreeing recommendations 2142 Agree. Thank you. Item 6 then is the community governance review for Board.
Thank you. I'm assuming everybody's all read the report, so I'll be very brief. It's just to seek that the recommendations that have been recommended for carrying out the governance review consider whether we should have a neighbourhood council in both of these areas. This is in line with the working together with the council in February 2019. There's a group for new parish council meeting cabinet 2021. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. John.
I suppose, like Councillor is saying, I should declare an interest as I chair the Free Peace Forum in Paris, which had expressed an interest in setting up a parish council. I wanted to ask about the turnout threshold on this, which is the report refers to a turnout of 5% or more with the requirement for Sore Heath for a ballot to be decided. Now, there are some changes in the wording. My group people decided at the moment to put on pause the parish council proposal, partly because of this turnout threshold, partly because we had recent experience of the Labour plan referendum with very mixed results, in the sense that there was a very good turnout amongst postal voters and a very poor turnout amongst non-postal voters in that. I think also it will be an interesting test of whether this turnout is feasible or not. I think the people of course will will be investing a lot into something which falls on a turnout which is less than 25%. The report says the Cabinet can then decide whether it's appropriate for the recommendations made that the parish council should be created if the turnout falls below 25%, which gives you some flexibility. I just wonder whether it would have been better to have been to set a lower turnout threshold from the start. I think 25% of the parish council referendum by this means of entirely postal votes arriving through people's doors is going to be quite challenging.
Thanks for that, John. My recollection when the report went through Cabinet and set this hurdle was that there were a number of options, and that was debated in Cabinet. Indeed, a compromise was arrived at following comments from definitely certainly not the self-representative referendum. So where we are here with this turnout is the result of some discussions across the parties.
Yeah, thank you. I was really just perfectly happy with the report. I just wanted to speak in favour. I do think we do need to have a turnout level. I don't think you can have a council which has tax raising abilities being introduced on citizens without having a significant show of support from that local area. It really wouldn't be right for that to be introduced on, a couple of hundred people in a ward of 17,000, getting to influence and force that upon everyone else. So no, just in support of turnout threshold. I do think it's important to have one.
Thank you. I do tend to agree with that. If people want to set up a parish council, they'll be prepared to vote in support of it and turn out to vote. There's no one else you want to action on? Okay, in which case we agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. Is that right? Item 7, City Centre CCTV. John.
Thanks, Stephen. These are a set of important proposals to help improve public safety and security in the city centre by upgrading and renewing CCTV network. In total, we're investing £845,000 to deliver 24 new CCTV cameras and upgrade a further 30 existing cameras, which will improve the quality and reliability of our CCTV network and deliver enhanced coverage of designated walking routes in the city centre, particularly around some of our transport connections, our stations and event venues. You might remember that Cabinet previously approved £745,000 capital for these works back in November. However, the appalling tax that we saw on members of our LGBT plus community rightly raised concerns over the effectiveness of the coverage of CCTV in the Gate Village and around Her Street. I've met with businesses and community reps down in the village and the south side bit, and seen draw up a 10-point plan to make the village safer and also tackle some of those wider issues of hate crime directed towards our LGBT plus citizens. So I'm pleased that this report actually honours one of those 10 points because it makes additional resources available for 4 more cameras in the south side area. We're really in discussion with local partners to determine the location of the cameras, and I hope that they'll go some way alongside measures to address street lighting, increased police presence, and what we're looking at around traffic management issues to keep people and businesses in the village and south side safe. Overall, these proposals give us a modern fit-for-purpose network of CCTV across the city centre, able to provide live HD images. We'll also close some gaps in the existing network and ensure that the deployment of cameras actually reflects how the city centre has changed over the last 2 decades as well. It certainly means that we're ready to welcome this fiscal the Commonwealth Games and able to honour our commitments to keep citizens safe and secure. So I'm pleased to recommend this report to Cabinet.
Thanks very much, John. As you say, the tax on Gate Village is reprehensible. I went down there a number of weeks ago now, and was left in no doubt about the strength of the building. So it's certainly good that we've managed to find this resource with some CCTV cameras down there.
Thank you. And absolutely share those comments. It's utterly disgraceful attacks that took place in Southside Bid area. And we just cannot be allowing such homophobic abuse to take place in the city. It's just totally unacceptable. In terms of that aspect of it, very much welcome the 4 new cameras, but would ask that that isn't the end of it. I think 4 isn't probably going to cover all of the parts of the area that need CCTV. So I hope that the Cabinet member will continue looking at what other resources can be secured to make sure that the whole area is made safe for people to go around their business. In terms of the rest of the report, when you get to the options, option 2 has positive comments written against it. In terms of it would have fully upgraded it and future-proofed, and then allowed actually areas outside of the city centre to gain from investment in CCTV in the future. That's been discounted, but there doesn't seem to be particular detail as to why that was the better long-term. That was not a better long-term option. It seems to just be discounted in the fact that it needed some more money in the short term, without any longer-term look as to whether or not doing that upgrade in one go would have been more cost-effective for the council. So then if the Cabinet member's got any more information he can provide as to why option 2 has been ruled out in that situation. In terms of, I think the other aspect of that, why it should have been included in the option process but hasn't, is what the reputational risk to the council is next year if something happens in one of those areas where we have CCTV, but it's not been upgraded to be sufficient quality to be used, and to whether that also should have been considered as part of that option to place it. In terms of the longevity of these new cameras, are these new cameras going to be remaining in place post Commonwealth Games? Obviously, the report talks about it being put in place for the Games, but are they then going to remain in place long term? And then in terms of project milestones, it's on page 163 of the report. Under project milestones, it's got the timetable of what the implementation of this scheme was expected to be. And it would appear that it's already 3 to 6 months behind schedule. In that it looked like the commissioning of all this should have already happened, unless I've misunderstood that timetables in there. So can the cabinet member perhaps just give us some assurances about what actions he's taken to make sure this is actually delivered in time for when it's needed next summer? And obviously, it was originally going to be completed by this winter, and it would be really good to get this improved CCTV in place for the Christmas season. So if we can have some update in that in terms of what the council is doing to make sure it is in place ASAP and in time for when the deadline, the Games, is when it's being put in place.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ian. When I was reading the report, I might be wrong, I think it says at the beginning of the report, wards affected, it mentions Leyland Ward, but from looking at the map, or my interpretation of the map in item B, it looks like it's Soho and Jewellery Quarter, Newtown and Portland and Highgate are affected by this as well. I just thought I'd mention it just in case the report could be corrected if that's the case. Also, the report refers to complementing multi-agency approach. I was just wondering if John could give us like how that shapes out as to what other agencies are sort of tapping into this and what sort of extra coverage, if any, of those multiple agencies bring. Item 3.5 on page 3 talks of previous investment. Now, you might have referred to that in your introduction, but I was just wondering how much money was invested in the previous tranche of 2020. It talks about there in the CCTV. And the final point I was going to mention was just something from memory that in 2019, 62 cameras were removed. I was on resources at the time and covering what was then Equality's community and cohesion, and it was showing regularly 200,000 overspend on cameras. And so I can remember those 62 cameras being removed. So I was just wondering how many of these cameras are going back to replace those cameras that were removed. So that was it. Thanks very much.
Yeah, technology has, of course, moved on.
No, exactly. That's hence the question.
John?
Thank you. Yeah, I fully support the house protection and Southside. I just wanted to ask some questions too about this paragraph 1.4 and link with the Commonwealth Games, because it refers to the upgrade providing enhanced coverage across designated walking routes, to rail, shuttle, bus transport, up to event venues. It seems to suggest that it's only applying in the city centre, whereas that would suggest that there is going to be enhanced coverage in Ferry Bar in particular, with significant walking routes between the station and stadium. On top of that, maybe I'll ask a question: what is the scope for developing mobile CCTV operations as part of the Commonwealth Games operations post Commonwealth Games? There might be a mobile unit that can be moved around the city to deal with the hotspots as they arise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I absolutely support this report. No community in our city should be in the way the LGBT community felt. That was an incredibly sad day for the city of Birmingham. There's very, very important members of our community were attacked for the so I'm really pleased that we're bringing forward this report to support. I know that the ways team academics have been working with driving the community safety to how we can also improve lighting in this particular area in the city too. So help with the business plan for respect to improving lighting as well as installing the CCTV cameras, which is very, very important. Thanks.
Thank you. The lighting issue is as important, I think, as the CCTV issue, because that does provide reassurance with them when they're walking around. John, you want to respond?
Yeah, quite a list there, so I'll work through it. Yeah, certainly just on that lighting point, we took Kevin and Co out last week to do a walkabout and look at specific areas where we may be able to improve lighting, indeed to identify potential locations for new cameras. Now, I absolutely hear what Councillor said. We look at all opportunities to improve the supply of CCTV coverage. Just to clarify then, this isn't just 4 cameras alone on south side around the village, it's 4 additional cameras to CCTV coverage already down there. If you go in and see the CCTV control, you can see the extent to which parts of the village are already covered by CCTV. So this is about closing gaps, not providing CCTV in its entirety. On the issue of the option 2, I'm really happy to give you some detailed assessments outside of the meeting. I'll go into the detail now. But I think it probably is a reflection part of the fact that you need to put your codes according to the plot available. So, we landed on an option that enables us to remove the CCTV network, which will be our budget envelope. Certainly, there will be a reputational risk to not being upgraded, but that's not reflected in the reports in terms of a specific item. I think it comes out of the detail. This is why we're doing this now, because we know that we need to be doing all we can to keep people in the city safe, ensure we've got that coverage. Certainly on the longevity of the cameras, they will remain in place long term. This is about more of our network, which is happening in advance of the Commonwealth Games, and consequences through that will provide lasting security and safety within the city centre. On the issue of the project milestones, if I can turn to Rob, just to perhaps pick up that point. Rob?
Thank you. And just to add to that, really, in terms of the milestones and the commissioning, as soon as we got the approval last month for the 745,000, we commissioned that, and you'll see in the planned procurement activity, it's in there as a proposed activity for procurement. So we will get those cameras in. Timescale will definitely is between 6 to 8 weeks, so we'll be getting them in as soon as possible. I think that just to add in relation to the extent of CCTV in the city, there are, of course, a range of cameras that are provided by not only the City Council, urban traffic cameras, the police have cameras, private organisations have cameras, and we're currently undertaking the review of all of that stock in the city. And who owns what and for what purpose. So I think that would be interesting for Cabinet to be aware, but bearing in mind, of course, that some of the CCTV coverage, some is overt, some is covert camera footage, so we have to be careful about what we release, but there is a range of coverage across the city that we're aware of, and we are working with partners to capture all of that information for the current situation.
Okay, I've got a few more. Yeah, so just moving on to the points from you. First of all, I'm pleased to award you the Stuart Stacey Memorial Award for postal reading reports.
So someone's got to pick up that.
Because I think you are right. There should be a couple of awards mentioned in there, and we will ensure that's picked up and reflected in the reports. I think Rob's probably already covered some of the points around multi-agency and working across the police, the police and others, so I won't go into further detail on that one. Again, on previous investment, that's probably something I can answer you outside of this meeting, that's okay. And as regards the removal of cameras in 2019, which I think you remember well, we were removing cameras at that point that were either defunct or in some cases no longer met the legal tests. So we were obliged to do that to meet our legal responsibilities. This is not about replacing cameras that were removed at that point. This is about the renewal of the existing network within the city centre. Councillor Hunt raised points around the scope of developing mobile CCTV. We certainly continue to look options for that. We do have a range of redeployable mobile CCTV already, which is operated through our local partnership delivery groups. I'm hoping that we can, as we move forward, continue to add to that and look at more opportunities to make that happen. You also mentioned around designated event venues. These actually refers to city centre. There's a map in the page which gives you a sense of where the cameras are, where the new ones will go, notwithstanding for additionally in safe time, which we're working on locations at the moment. I
think that's picked up very different on starting with
Okay, thank you very much, John. In which case, can we agree recommendations 2-1 to 3? Thank you. Item 8 is the Yoink Spawning and Badminton Championships for 2022 through to 2026. This report details the rationale for the council's proposed sponsorships of the All-England Championships for that period, and indeed the city's continued hosting of the event, which we've hosted since 1994. The championships, of course, support the local economy, they boost tourism, and they promote an active lifestyle, as well as promoting Birmingham as a city of sport, enhancing its image profile and reputation both nationally and internationally. The budget for the championships is accounted for within the major events budget, so this funding. And the All England Championships are, of course, the Wimbledon of badminton, part of the HSBC Badminton World Federation Series, where it sits as one of just 3 Super 1000 tournaments alongside Tournament China and another one in Indonesia that are the top tier of the circuit. And the event, of course, has significant prominence across Asia, with streaming and TV coverage, so the profile and image of the city is greatly enhanced within those particular markets. Here in Birmingham, the championships attract 31,000 visitors who come to the city to watch the world's elite players from over 30 countries. And as I've said, the profile and image of the city is raised through that worldwide coverage of the event and via broadcast and live streaming internationally, with a potential household reach of over 336 million people across 69 markets around the world. Badminton Association England have given a commitment to appoint a dedicated legacy manager to engage in disadvantaged communities to focus on the most inactive and underrepresented to achieve long-term gains in physical activity and well-being. And Badminton England will also use their coaching network to support and train coaches, teachers, and volunteers to work in schools to encourage participation and to increase local competition in support of local talent. The Badminton England also see the City Council as a long-term key partner, and they wish to work in partnership with us to ensure the ongoing success of the event, and they'll share with the city the event costs to ensure transparency. And in addition, appropriate media evaluations and economic impact reporting will also be shared. The Birmingham brand was in the top 5 of the 2021 championships, generating a QI media value in excess of 3 million for over 631 hours of exposure on the internet and television. And the most recent study reported direct economic impact on the city of £2.58 million as a result of staging the 2018 championships. Notwithstanding all of that, we've discussed with Badminton and we've had some further measures that we'd like to take to maximise investment into the city. So Badminton England Council will meet with the Chamber of Commerce and the West Midlands Growth Company to explore how the event can be used to provide links with local businesses to key markets in Malaysia, Japan, China, etc. And Badminton England and BCC events will facilitate a meeting with internal service providers such as catering, conferencing, advertising, etc., to explore what commercial opportunities may exist linked to the championships. And for this particular cycle, Badminton England will identify resources and services for tender and promote a Birmingham first approach to their tendering operation. So all in all, I think this is an event that's been taking place in the city since 1994, and it is delivering both in terms of profile and economic benefit, but we are not resting on our laurels, we're looking to push that even further. Okay, questions, Robin?
Thank you. I think that last point you mentioned about the longevity of the tournament is a really key one, because you only build that profile about it being one of the premier events on the circuit by having that longevity and keeping on the circuit for a long period of time. I just really have 2 things I wanted to pick up. One, directly relating to this, which is to do with what work we're doing, or indeed can we just look to do in the future, if there's perhaps commitment on that, to really make sure we're maximising in terms of what backdrops are on show, so that when things are on show and on camera, we are showing the opportunities are in Birmingham as much as we're allowed to within whatever the sponsorship arrangements are, just to make sure we're really maximising that opportunity to promote the city for investment. And then the other one is relevant to this, but it's actually also relevant probably to any of the sports tournaments we hold in the city, which is can we perhaps go away and have a look at what could be done around offering either discounted or free sessions of the actual sport for kids in the city. So, this is badminton. Actually, during that period, why aren't we looking to see if we can do a scheme in some of the council badminton courts to say, actually, you can book this and have a free session so you can see if you like it, and try and build on that promotion there is anyway in the city at the time that sports here, to actually try and get people into new sports. And indeed, the other side of that is, if we didn't want to do that, or indeed both of them, we also could look at what could be done around having schools tournaments at the same time. So if we've got a badminton tournament on, why don't we see if there's a schools tournament in across Birmingham schools for badminton at the same time? You can even do it so you actually have the final at the same venue at the end of the tournament when it's all finished, before it's all taken down, if that's a feasible thing in terms of other bookings. Just again to help try and promote sport in the city, and just really increase the reach, the opportunities, and try and make sure people in the city have got the best opportunity to get sport and indeed reach the top of sport.
Thank you. Just to support what Councillor said about ensuring that we've got more people in the community accessing the facilities. I know previously, Visually Power Badminton Club have access to the facilities either before or after the tournament, so they've been able to play on the same courts that the world's best badminton players play. Is that something we need to explore again? Yes, I think both those are good points. And paragraphs 311 and 312, which talk about badminton's England's commitment to appoint a legacy manager and use their coaching model to support work with schools to encourage participation, is something that we will take up with badminton to see if we can get possibly a schools tournament. And I do like the idea of staging or giving the opportunity to school children to participate in the actual venue where the championships take place. So we will take those matters up with badminton England. So can we agree then recommendations 2, 1 to 2, 3? So 3, thank you. Moving on then to the update on fire safety in high-rise buildings. 2021 council stock. Right.
Thank you everyone. I'm hoping that you've all read the report. I'll just be very brief anyway. This is an update of fire safety on our buildings. The safety of our residents, especially in our high-rise, is the most important given that Birmingham has over 210 council stock high-rise buildings. This is the annual report, an overview of the excellent work and approach that our buildings have done following the tragedy events of Granville. Earlier this year, the government published 2 reports, pieces of legislation, the Fire Safety Act and the Building Safety Bill. Birmingham is also working on a national level with the Department of Government Association, Leveling and National Housing Federation on the matter relating to fire and building safety. To look and HSE also met with officers early this month regarding how Birmingham can help and support and develop new high-rise tower building safety regulations. Birmingham has also funded a program of sprinklers into its flats in all our high tower-rise blocks. 176 have been completed by March 2021 and a further 27 will be completed by March 2022. Since last December, we have commenced upgrading all fire doors to our high tower blocks. This program will approximately be 5 years and also helping to bring in additional income to Shelford. We have positive working relationships with our fire service and the resilient exercises coordinated between the 2 services to stimulate a live fire safety situation at our high-rise blocks. The exercise enables the fire service to pilot technology and learning can be involved in the changes of the resilience plan. The final bit of this report is concerns of the privately owned high-rise residential buildings and the way in which running is the national fund to pay for installation for common fire alarm systems to enable residents' buildings with unsafe cladding systems to enable costly working watch measures to reduce or replace. The fund will also be benefited from leaseholders. 8 buildings have been installed. For this funding in Birmingham, we have been allocated 1.7 million admission to the civic funds. Administrating the funding for the applicants. So that's all I'm really going to say. A lot more I can say. Very brief. Just to say that Cabinet is asked to not endorse and not state the fire safety to accept the way too much funding.
Thanks very much. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously welcome 1.7 million of government money in this area. A couple of questions I got from reading the report. I see it's saying 1.7 million is to go through a Civico. Is all that 1.7 million going directly for improvements, etc., in these buildings, or does the Civico take any of that 1.7 million for its own admin and covering costs, etc.? And on the report on the state policy, and it obviously welcome the investment in the fire doors, etc., because those intermittent strips, etc., don't stay, so obviously can corrode and don't expand over time. Have we checked to make sure that all other fire breaks and fire checks, etc., in those buildings haven't been circumvented by maintenance that, albeit well-meaning, haven't done a scenario? I know at the time when we used to supply products into this area, we'd have products that. An extreme example is some products would be fine, except would not supply any point of fire retardancy, and they would be, and then on site they would use a fire retardant paint or something like that to get around that, which to me is not acceptable, even though the fire officer in those days would sign it off. But of course, once the paint is damaged or removed, of course, there's no fire retardancy anymore in that area. I'm sure we won't do that. But I was just wondering, have we made sure that all those other fire breaks and checks, etc., are still in place so that be a fire or anything like that, it's all got this fantastic fire door, which just the fire doesn't go waltzing around the side. So obviously it just goes down the route of least resistance. Thanks very much.
Robert.
No, sorry, I haven't got any question.
Okay.
Thanks for your question. We do have regular checks, but I'll bring in Julie just to sort of, and if she can ask the question about Civico's cost.
I suspect that the Civico does need some admin because that, as you're no doubt aware, is the usual practice in the private sector. Julie, do you want to just come to the page?
Thank you, Leader. So with regards to the management of the Waking Watch Fund, Department of Learning and Housing and Communities do make an allowance for administration of the fund. We've received really excellent feedback by the department about our relationship with the Civico and our delivery against its Waking Watch Fund. So there is an allowance in there for them to administer that fund, and they've done exceptionally well in doing so. With regards to all the fire safety checks, we assure you that all fire safety checks are actually done. We have fire safety assessments done on a yearly basis, and they can be reviewed periodically across all our buildings. And what you'll see in the report is that we're looking to introduce fire safety level 3 fire risk assessments, so to actually really enhance that assessment that we've already got in place. Anything that comes out like fire safety assessment obviously is immediately pushed through to our capital investment programme and prioritised where necessary.
Thanks very much. And whilst the 1.7 million from the government is to be welcome, when in the light of the Great Bill Travel, I wrote on several occasions to the government about assisting with funding to fit sprinklers to high-rise parts, not just in Birmingham, but across the country nationally, and that would have helped us get over this problem with leaseholds. But of course, this is a significant cost. The government, I'm afraid, were deaf to my requests, and did not respond positively to the letters that sent. Notwithstanding that, can we agree then recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Item 10 is the Druid Heath regeneration. First of all, there is a very, very late amendment to paragraph 731 of this report. Errol has emailed this amendment round. The consequence of that change to that paragraph in the public report changes the wording in the exempt appendix. That's also been emailed around. Whilst you're finding that email, so you can all read what the change is, if necessary, I'll read out the amended paragraph 731. Let me just introduce the report. I've been out to Druid Heath on a number of occasions to speak to residents out there about this regeneration. What was quickly apparent was that they themselves wanted something more ambitious for their local community. This is a very tight-knit community, a lot of civic pride and a lot of working class, actually, pride in the area. So following the meetings I've had and a resident consultation in 2018, culminating in a public meeting in February 2020, it's been clear from that feedback that there was a need to address both social, economic, community and environmental issues. And so a more extensive master plan is now required. And this report seeks authority to commence a wider master planning and investment strategy in order to respond to the requests from the local community for a more holistic approach to the regeneration of Druid Heath, and indeed factoring in the fact that the city has declared a climate emergency, and we need to ensure that this regeneration contributes to route to zero ambitions. The delivery option will consider developing the first phase of Druid Heath North, which is the land to the north of Bells Lane, and a separate authority will sought to identify development opportunities in Druid Heath South, which comprises the land to the south of Bells Lane. Within this report as well, it also highlights that we are engaging a company to continue the consultation with local residents to ensure that we do keep you on board as we move this regeneration forward. Any comments or questions? Robert?
Thank you very much, and welcome that continuation of consultation. I think it's really important that the local community is fully involved, and certainly we've seen where there's been BMHD redevelopment in Erdington, where it's been done in partnership with local communities. It's gone down much better, but it's also led to a much better design scheme as well, particularly in the appearance of the building. So I do think that's important. I wanted to pick up a couple of things around this. I welcome the sort of change of tact, if you like, to now look at a wider, more comprehensive redevelopment. Druid Heath is very similar in timescale to how Castlevale used to be. But they've gone a very different path since they were originally built. And that is in no small part down to the comprehensive redevelopment that took place in Castlevale a couple of decades ago, with significant government money with the hat that helped do it. So I do think that can lead to much better outcomes for the residents there if we do a comprehensive project. I think that's really welcome. And the other aspect, which I think is really key, and as far as I'm aware, not being as close to obviously as the ward councillor will be, there still remains this issue about having a proper right to return. So those people who might have lived in substandard conditions for 20 years on the estate, not being given a guaranteed right to move into the redeveloped estate. I do think it's really important that those people who the councillor has left to deal with the bad side of the estate, if you like, should get to benefit from the regeneration of the estate. So I would ask that with this new delay there is while a comprehensive scheme is worked up, that we look again at ensuring there is a proper right to return to guarantee the rights of those people who've lived there a long time to get to benefit from regeneration. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, on the issue of Castlevale, of course, there was a lot more money on the table from in Druid Heath, I believe. But in Castlevale there was more than, getting up to 3 times, I think, the amount of money we initially had available for this particular redevelopment. But as I say, responding to what we heard from the local community, we are looking to expand our ambitions here in line with the local community's desires. As to the right to return, there is no right to return. We have explored this time and time again. The difficulty is, as you look across the city as a whole, some of the regeneration schemes that will take place across the city, it's simply not going to be possible to offer a right. So what there is an option to return. Having said that, in the case of Druid Heath, there are currently 48 residents on the option to return list, and all of those can be accommodated within the development as it moves forward. So all of those who expressed desire to take up the option are going to be accommodated as this redevelopment or regeneration, moves forward. So with that, if there's no other comments, then can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.9? Thank you. Items 11 and 12 will come back to because got all the additional questions on the exempt appendices. So we'll move to item 13, which is Birmingham City Council performance and progress against the delivery plan during Q2 of this financial year, please?
Thank you. It's the usual report here, still ongoing frustration. We can't get national data to benchmark ourselves against. The people that we get that data from have continued to suspend their data gathering due to COVID. That is something we have been raising with them again and again. It is very important to pay off to others, but that is the situation where we are at. You've got the information in front of you. I haven't today like to highlight it in particular areas, but otherwise, I'll turn it over.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Thanks very much. Ian, got a few points, not many consider the size of the report. The first one was just on the deputy leader section and sort of reference there to the digital inclusion strategy. And certainly in coordinating ONS, we received contributions from Virgin Media, which is a very positive one regarding their plans for fibre basically improvements of broadband in the city. BT came in and made their contribution, which was not quite so helpful, I would suggest. I think we all saw during lockdown that whilst we have an element of broadband provision in the city, it's not quite the quality we would like it all to be. So certainly let's take away from my personal views, but we'll stay with it. And certainly I would be interested to know if there's been any progress from those individuals, or even about having an extra fibre supply coming to the city. I think we've got quite a support on that. On education, skills and culture, the sale of food and drink into a lot of our entertainment industry is an important income stream for them, as well as ticket sales, etc. And there's a lot of I should put a competition at the minute for staff. There's a lot of the hospitality industries are all opening up at the same time. So those who work in that industry are getting their pick of where they can go and work. And I was just wondering, with the clean air zone, with that midnight cut-off time, finding that the workers are finding they're getting hit twice as they come to work in the city, where, of course, they're being charged on the way in and then after midnight being charged on the way out. And just wondering if there could be some flexibility around that, because obviously entertainment venues are finding themselves at a disadvantage compared to those that are not inside the clean air zone, which is difficult then for our entertainment venues to attract people. Apologies for my phone ringing earlier on, but that's my daughter talking about just heading off to get her booster jab that she's now had this morning. And the report made mention there about sort of vaccine rollout, etc. in schools, and there's reference to numbers and consent, but there was no actual data against the back of that. So I was just wondering how vaccine rollout has been going in the schools, and has consent been a problem, or so there's reference to it, but it's nothing really to get a quantify it. And the last question I've got was our health and sort of social care portfolio. And I sort of read at the weekend that there was starting to be concern about the large disproportionate level of men that are dying of COVID, and obviously any death of anyone's really sad. But I was just wondering if we had any more data about that. Was that just a paper story, or is there anything behind that to show that there is a sort of unbalanced number of deaths in that area? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ewan, and congratulations to your daughter. So pleased to see that she's going to have a boost to feel herself as safe as possible. John?
Thank you. Again, I'll keep it to a couple of items because there's quite a busy agenda today. Two issues. Acton's assured Mr. the Deputy Leader said earlier that was only one example of any issues on the council, and that's true. And it's a very visible one, but also when it's not working, it's also very visible. Cabinet member last week told council that 99% of collections are being done on time, which doesn't really match the experience of North Birmingham, where residents have been missing pretty well every other collection over most of the autumn. I wonder if this figure was based on the statistics here, which appear to be based on the number of reports of missed collections, divided by the total number of collections, which is not actually a measure the total number of missed collections. There's been this problem for a while with the council, and the statistic here, I think, refers to the number of phoned in or emailed or reported reports from residents of missed collections. And we know that if a whole road or neighbourhoods, there's only a few people will fall in because everybody will reckon the council knows. It's been reported by the crews. And in the past, 2 reports were marked as one miscollection, not 50 or 100 or whatever they were. So perhaps the company could clarify what figures he's been quoting in terms of miscorrections. The second issue it is around planning approvals, and there's a remarkable statistic here showing a huge improvement in terms of planning approvals done on time, I think from 65% to 98%. Which sounds like somebody's got a rocket for the department. However, what measures have we got to ensure that quality is being maintained? I'll just say that because, as an example, I was looking at a planning application on my ward last night, and the text on the planning application came up back to front. The letters are all back to front, and it's been filed on the council website. It sounds like it got filed in rather haste. And might match some of my other experience in terms of the way planning applications have been handled at the moment. So I just wanted to present countervailing measures of quality within departments.
Let me just deal with that myself before we move on. What has happened, it's been quite interesting actually the way that productivity in the planning department increased through people working from home. So it does just show that working from home can impact on productivity. Apologies for the fact that planning applications come out back to front, as it were, but quality is, of course, overseen by managers of the service, and I'm confident that they are managing this in a way that is ensuring that we are maintaining quality as well as increasing our performance on planning decisions.
Thank you. And as people have said, I'll stick to a couple of things given the large agenda. Obviously, you can see in section 4 of the report, it picks up that 39% of indicators are going in the wrong direction currently, so that there is work there to be continually done and tracking them and trying to improve them by the administration. Picking up on page 335, that talks about the bids. Obviously, it's sad news, ACOG's green bid didn't get reapproved, but obviously good news, the other ones in there did, and as I've declared previously, we actually declared then on the council's budget director, and the bid mentioned in there, clearly we were very happy in Everton that the bid got back through. In terms of specific question on SPO3, which deals with the missed collections, and we can see that obviously over the quarter there's been a 40% increase in missed collections, and on the month, the in-month figure looks like it's 58% increase. The solution that's talked about in the blurb after it talks about effectively a slab in the cab style technology being put in place. Can the cabinet member explain how this differs to the previous slab in the cab technology the administration put into the bin lorries? How this one will work if the other one didn't, and what the cost of this new slab in the cab style technology is? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's actually comments on the cabinet starting with John Michel.
I would know that we've had a very strong performance in terms of reducing the amount of waste in landfill, and that should ensure we achieve our year target. This is a service that is reliant on human beings, that more than the other services in the council. And we have struggled over the past few months. I suspect we may struggle over the coming months because of absence due to COVID. There was a peak, particularly during this period, of crew members in their second jab, which was a good thing. But I did see a number of them off sick for the years after that, and that was across the service. We also have an ongoing problem that we are not able to source HGV drivers from our agency as we have in the past. They're not out there to get, so we have to cope with what we have. And that means if we lose a driver, we're not able to replace them if we lose the van. We have drawn crews in from street cleansing where they are actually qualified, and that has impacts on street cleansing in the case of the pandemic. Will need to be the case. We will be training up some of our own people internally to drive HGVs. That does take a bit of time. So I'm aware we have ongoing issues, particularly in Payvine. We have some respite in a few weeks where we have the 14 garden waste rooms available, they'll be back into and largely in Bar and covering that. I know that this week has been rather better in the service. Council Hunt asked about the measure we use is the same as one used across the country. That's why we use it. So it's a comparison we can make across the other local authorities. Other authorities have also suffered a similar problem with lack of crew, which is why Veolia, or one of the major private sector groups, they have offered a £1,500 joining bonus to refuse drivers. There's no bonus being offered by Tesco and other providers who need HGV drivers, so it's a very competitive market. So the numbers we use are measured across the service, and they're measurable and comparable across the country. So I'm happy with what it is accurate. It is not a perfect measure. I've said that it is an effective guide to better performance overall. Then it is that we do a lot of idea. I think where it falls over, as you do enough reporting, there are some areas where residents who do not report it sufficiently. I would like to do so more accurate data. But it is certainly an effective guide, and there are many other measures that we use. Councillor Orden asked about the slag in the cap. I'm not able to comment on the previous ones because I wasn't not at the time. But it's been trialled. It's been working with the crews. They like it. They want it installed, and we'll get that completely installed probably by the start of probably about my usual March next year, possibly. I'll have to go back to the costs now for that is in my head. I'll go back to a lot of costs.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, if I may come back on that, the cabinet members sort of partly responded to my query, but I just wanted clarification. That measure that's been used then is a measure of resident complaints. It's not a measure of the total number of missed collections, and that shouldn't be used as a measure of total number of missed collections. It's a useful benchmark to know what's going on, but it should not be used, therefore, as a measure of missed collections. We don't seem to have that measure still for the total number of missed collections.
Again, it is the measure that's used by the local authorities. So we could divide the whole new benchmark, but then we would not be able to benchmark our performance with other local authorities. And I'd rather use nationally equivalent measure. Yeah. I appreciate it's not accurate, but that's not it.
No, we've got to use the measure that's established nationally.
Thanks, I just want to respond to your comment around the clean air zone. I think the good news story about clean air zone is the compliance levels for private cars, which are nearly at 90%. So 9-10 car journeys into the clean air zone are not impacted by a clean air zone charge. It's good news that people are now compliant cars. So the next one will be releasing the air quality figures for the first time. So we announced when we launched the clean air zone that every 6 months we will be publishing air quality data. So I'm quite excited with what the data that we will be publishing with respect to that. Councillor Matthew commented about the fact that if you're working nights in the city centre, you have to pay something that you have to pay going out. If you're working 5 nights a week, which I assume quite a few people are, if they're working night-time currently, you actually pay 6 times a week because you're not paying each time you come in and out, you're paying a 24-hour period. So you're also paying on the last day, you're paying going out. You're paying for the 5 charges to the 24-hour period before that. In terms of changing that system, that we are using what the government's mandated us to use. The back office system is controlled by the government. I know there's been a number of issues that Councillor Hunt raised at the previous cabinet meeting, some challenges around how user-friendly the clean air zone is and how we continue to have conversations with the government, particularly Jack Department. We are one of the first clean air zones to be working with. We are using their back office system. They've set up the payment system the way it is. They've set up the mechanism of how people pay. So it's very difficult
for us to make that change with us. But we continue to relay this information to the government to have conversations with them.
Yes, so yes, let's go up to government, and let's hope that they will listen to the evidence that we are gathering through this and respond by making some positive changes. Paula.
Right, Councillor Macklin, that was actually a very interesting question. Oh, that was a really interesting question because you asked about men. Now, if you can remember, back from the first wave, men were always the group that were highest hit, and we think that remains the same. The issue here is we've had no information sent to public health recently to substantiate that. So although it's something in the news, we've known this since the first wave. So what I'll do is I'll ask Justin to do a bit of a recce to find out exactly what the numbers are. But at this moment in time, I've always presumed that men were the group that was higher, you know, your taxi drivers, your shops and your shop workers, some of those groups, some of the ice across the country to be hit, train drivers, what have you. So I can't give you any more than that, but I promise you I'll send it out because it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, through Ian, because obviously that's certainly young boys from a group that aren't great at coming forward to get their jabs either, other than if you could make a connection between not being vaccinated and the fact that you may be more at risk, it may help people picking those jabs up.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to the one item, well, two items actually, it's in my program. I'm a little surprised that the Council government didn't raise it itself, because it's about what the Commonwealth Games are bringing to a very large part of Birmingham. And you'll see on page 4 of 99 that the vision for legacy public, Perry Bar 2040, sorry, a vision for legacy. The public consultation on that document ran between the 15th of July and 29th of September. There were more than 700 engagements recorded over that period, and the revised master plan is now scheduled to come together in February of next year. And there is significant support from partners, including the government, for the delivery plan and the emerging Perry Bar 2040 programme. So the games are transforming that part of Birmingham, which I'm sure as the Hunt welcomes. The Perry Bar residential scheme as well is continuing apace. There are 968 units on site, includes 312 affordable homes. And in addition to all of that, the business tourism programme has gained approval from DCMS and also has accreditation with the Commonwealth Games Federation. And that business and tourism programme will no doubt afford business opportunities for many of the companies operating in and around Birmingham. Well, I thought that might be one of the response.
Well, you challenged me to respond, so there you are. We have actually got Games Transport Plan later in the agenda. I was meant to raise some issues. I mean, yes, I'm supportive of the programme master plan to date. I'm waiting to see what the final version is. It's been very promising, some of the ideas that come forward, and as you know, we've been very supportive of those. And I'd be interested to see if it picks up the challenge I made last week with the City Council, which the City Council accepted to investigate, is how you support those small businesses who used to be in neighbourhoods like that, who rely very much on a low cost base, how you get them back in, and the dynamism they often bring, rather than just national chains who sometimes come back in when you put in new buildings. So there's a challenge there, and I'd be interested to see how that works out.
Thank you. Richard,
Yeah, just two last bits to pick up, I think. So congratulations to your daughter. I just booked my third jab yesterday, as soon as I became eligible. The staff chambers have started up again and are picking up some consistent fits in poor performance. So that's just a reassuring in terms of drilling down some of these areas. You asked about broadband. So we've got some work ongoing on the digital city. I think was linked to what you referenced, looking at how we can meet our mission to get proper connectivity, whatever that looks like, across the city, be that 5G or fibre, whatever is required. So that bit of work is ongoing. We are working on it. That should come to the future. candidates, and obviously scrutiny if they want it in due course. The ambition is there to work is easily done. I think that's all the points from me to pick up, other than we very much look to get national benchmarking back into this as soon as possible. We are that information. Points around data collection are wanted. Otherwise, I'll hand back to you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Ewan. You have final comment.
I just had one question that wasn't picked up. It was just about level of consent, etc., for vaccine in schools. There was a mention of it in the report, but there was no numbers attached to it.
I think parents have to give consent.
Yeah, I was just wondering because it made a reference to.
Are we struggling to get consent? I think.
Yeah, there was a reference. I wasn't sure how much of a problem that really was, because it made reference to it, but didn't give it any sort of size or magnitude.
I think the person who is most likely to know the answer to that is the Director of Public Health. Unfortunately, he's actually need to go to another meeting, so we'll try and get Justin to email that. In which case, then, can we agree recommendation 2.1? Agree? We're now due to have a conference break. I would suggest we plan on unless anybody needs a break for a moment. Okay, we'll continue on. I'm just going to come back to the Drury Seed Regeneration report, which I'll move on with people. We are all content with that amendment to paragraph 731, that triggers an amendment in the exempt appendix. We're happy with that. It has been in our okay. I just wanted to check that. Thank you. We'll move on then to item 14, which is the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games Transport Plan. In line with other major games, the Commonwealth Games Act of 2020 made provision for a Games Transport Plan. Over the last 12 months, Transport for West Midlands, in collaboration with City Council and other partners, prepared the Games Transport Plan for consultation and engagement, and that consultation engagement concluded on the 24th of September this year. In addition to coming here for agreement, the Transport Plan will also be presented for approval at the West Midlands Combined Authority Board meeting in January. The 5 core principles of the Games Transport Plan are set out in paragraph 3.2. The plan has a dual purpose. First of all, it informs the public and businesses of the approach to transport and provides guidance and information on the arrangements that will be in place during the Games. And secondly, it sets the context for transport planning and cooperation, formally capturing the commitment by all partners to deliver the transport interventions that will be required during the Games. More detailed operational planning will follow and will continue to be developed right up to the Games themselves in order to ensure that the transport agreements are the best they can be for residents, visitors and businesses. We are working to ensure that we have a public transport game, so Games tickets will include access to public transport in the local area on the day of the event to which you have a ticket, and Games time volunteers, the organising committee workforce and all members of the Games family will also be able to access the local public transport network. All competition venues will have bookable blue badge parking available. We are currently, in spite of everything that's going on with the Omicron variant, we are currently planning for full spectator presence events with maximum capacity at venues around Birmingham and the wider Birmingham area. The Games, of course, is a unique opportunity to create a positive transport legacy of increased sustainability, improved public transport infrastructure, and reduced dependency on private car journeys. And the Games has been a catalyst for other transport schemes such as Sprint and the 8 million works associated with the Ferrybar Regeneration Scheme, along with the redevelopment of Ferrybar and University rail stations. Between them, they represent investments approaching £200 million in transport infrastructure. That sum, 200 million, of course, exceeds the amount of money that the City Council is investing in this event. As a result of that investment and the opportunities it creates, will enable more people to take up active travel, not just for the Games, but beyond the Games themselves. In addition to that, the Birmingham 2022 aims to be the first carbon neutral Commonwealth Games, and so it will maximise the use of cleaner generators and supply a modern and cleaner bus fleet for the city and wider area. As part of the pledge to increase conservation and sustainability, the Games partners will also clean 22 miles of canals through the United by 2022 partnership that exists with the Canal and River Trust. We've updated, so Tiff and we have updated the draft Games transport plan to reflect the outcomes of the consultation exercise that, as I said, was completed last September. And the final version of the Games transport plan will be published in January of next year. So,
Thanks, Ian. I just want to echo what you said, and also take this opportunity to thank the Office of Public Transport and the London Council for all the hard work that they're doing. This plan is clearly in line with the Council's urban and transport plan too, and so it's good to see that there's strong agreement between what we're doing and the regions. As Ian said, there's a very strong focus on public transport. The Games have been a massive catalyst for investment into our city and region. And I hope today's cabinet report will set a reminder to government to be able to tell that we've got our zebra bid, which is still pending decision, and hopefully we will get the 125 hybrid buses allocated so we can have not only the 20 that we report, but another 125 hybrid buses on our roads in Birmingham by the time the whole world's attention is back on Birmingham in a couple of days. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. Yes, so we come back to this. Firstly, very much supported being public transport games and being a carbon neutral games, and I think we also from the outset the ambition is to be the greenest games ever. In terms of this report, what concerns me slightly is that lack of detail. We are so close to the event, and you referred to operational plans emerging. Look at the next issue of Park and Ride that we keep coming back to. There's no detail on how that's going to be provided. I think the original Park and Ride, the 20% of the motorway decision is a very key aspect of transport planning for the games. There's a very interesting concept of more in this document, which I think basically refers to the concept of what people often do arriving at Claribel Station and walking up to the stadium, presumably the same in other places. I think that's fine. And in my experience of athletics events, visitors tend to be very well behaved. And I'm reasonably confident that they're going to be very supportive of all the measures that are put in place. What I would say about walk and ride, however, is it exemplifies the relationship with the legacies which we referred earlier. Because I think there's opportunities. I'm not sure yet that the Games have taken the opportunities that lay with the idea of the greenest games ever. That was there at the outset, because one of the concepts was that at the stadium it's taking place not on a brownfield site but a greenfield site, and an opportunity to showcase green and leafy England, Gold Coast and the coast, the Australian coast. We've got green and leafy England in Perry Park in the heart of Birmingham. There was the opportunity to showcase that. So I wonder whether Walk and Ride is going to be developed to start to bring in some of those legacy ideas, because the very that we're in our neighbourhood plan about walking routes through the area, and as well as taking a walking route back to Perry-Bar Station down the Walsall Road, there are huge opportunities, particularly if people are coming for a half-day event, to direct them for other walking routes which are really pleasant through Perry-Moor Park, for instance, around the area. There are huge opportunities which will enable and mean that some of those legacy ideas are brought forward to bring forward those routes. Similarly, in terms of carbon neutral, I've got to say this, and you look at this plan and you see that the transport plan at Perry Park, and you see it sort of dumped on the map. What people looking at the map will realise is that just on the edge of it, it's dumped on a children's playground and a bit of copse. And the consequence of it being there, as opposed to a few feet in the other direction, is the children's playground is gone, and a few more trees have been taken out of the park. And one of the problems I think residents have perceived in the work is that lots of different project teams have been active in the area, and each team has taken it on themselves to remove a few trees. And the overall effect on Perry Park is to reduce that canopy, which and still quite a good canopy to be fair, but reduce it significantly because of individual projects taking out their own little bunch of trees. Now I know we're promised lots of replacement trees, and that's important. But again, I just wonder whether more should be done to think about what the impact on visitors is going to be. When they come out of the games, they've been there for half a day, they've got a chance to wander around, to enjoy our parks and our city, what the impact is going to be when that happens.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess the glass is only half empty as far as you're concerned, isn't it?
We have to raise these things, you know.
The games. I think, first of all, you've fundamentally misunderstood the point of the games transport plan. This is the overarching document. The transport plan will set the framework for the detailed tactical and operational planning. So that will come. So you will see the detail that you say is missing from this plan. Never intended that that detail would be in this plan. We will be hosting the Green Summer Games, and we would like to point that out, and we will use the opportunity to showcase the green city that we all live in and love. The Perry Bar Master Plan does indeed pick up and suggest the opening up of new walking routes in and around Perry Bar. So let's have a copy. You've seen that's written into that document. And as for the transport mall in the park, that will be reinstated as part of post-games. And the plans are for significant investments in the park going forward. So I think we'll see a real enhancement to Perry Park post-games if we can lever the investment that's required to deliver on the vision that we have set. And I would look to you, should you be successful in this way, to support that document and help us lever in that particular investment. There's no further comments. Can I ask for agreement on recommendations 2, 1, 2, 3? Thank you. We'll move on then to item 15, which is highway maintenance and management and BMI contract. So,
Thanks, Ian. So this report provides 3 key updates. The highways maintenance and PMI contract, particularly with long-term partner subcontractor with respect to that, the extension of the current interim arrangements with Key Highways Limited, and some further progress of capital investment next year. The highway management will and the 6-7 tunnels. All 3 are absolutely critical in managing the delivery of highway service in the city. So it's proposed that the formal procurement of the long-term replacement subcontractor commences with Birmingham Highways Limited in January 22, with the intention that the contract will be awarded in April 23. In the meantime, I'm pleased to report that the extension arrangements for Care Highways have been agreed in the past few days since the publication of this report. I find looking at the investment moving forward, obviously colleagues are aware that we've invested 44.5 million in the current year, on top of this approximately 60 million pound maintenance. So that's over 100 million pound being invested into maintaining and improving our highway network this coming year. We're looking to increase that to 50 million pound of investment, along with the 60 million pound of maintenance, over 110 million pound going into our highway network. So I think colleagues are really pleased with the 3 key updates in this report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ian. It's quite an interesting report. I was just wondering, when you're going out for sort of market and dipping a toe in the water, and really what sort of response there's been from contractors looking to sort of take on the contract, and you can give us some sort of timescales for when you think that may sort of come to fruition, and also really just your views on the roads currently. Do you think they're good enough or acceptable sort of quality? And finally, the question I was going to ask was about, and I know it makes reference to the sponsoring board in the report, and talking about reports of political leadership. So I just wondered what the sponsoring board was actually, how that was going to take shape and what it's going to do. And that's with the reference to political leadership, does that sort of imply that things are the way they are now because there hasn't been political leadership? I don't know. I was quite intrigued that it appeared in the report, so I was just asking what it actually meant.
With respect to contractors, obviously we continue to have conversations with the market. I have to be very, very careful because of commercial sensitivities around that, but happy to have a conversation offline with you and other colleagues with respect to that. In terms of the quality of roads, I think the roads in Birmingham are in need of investment, and that's why last year we ensured, or this current year rather, we ensured over £40 million going in to resurfacing programs for highways and footways, and there's a further £50 million plan going in, and I'm confident of that will ensure that our roads move forward fit for purpose. In terms of sponsoring board, I think it was really important to look to move into the next phase of this very, very important service that we put together, not just the political leaders or myself as the chair, Councillor Chapter as the cabinet member, that we ensure that we've got strong leadership from the senior leadership of officers of the council who also support that. So Becky's on that, Rob James on that. In fact, I think the lineup right behind opposition members, as John Shane, part of the sponsoring board, and there's other colleagues on there too. So I think it's really important that the council leadership team is coming together to give this very important area the right level of approach as we move forward in the next phase to identify the long-term partner that we want to procure at the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you. As the cabinet members touched on, a lot of this is exempt. So I would just thank the officers for the briefing they gave our group just to help be able to ask them those questions. Otherwise, we've taken up a lot of time here. So I just one question really for the cabinet member, given the questions we've been able to ask the officers beforehand, and that's around how confident are you that the timescales within this, because there's obviously already been significant delays to getting this sorted, are going to be met, and how confident are you that the extension needed to then get to that timescale will happen?
Thanks, Ian. With respect to the private briefings, I think the last 2 years we've ensured that all elected members are regularly briefed. At times there's a private briefing so they can share with all the 101 members of the council everything that we know. And some of it obviously we can't put in the public. So I think that's going to be required. Please, your comments with respect to how important they have been. With respect to the timescales, they're very realistic. Rather than being optimistic and pessimistic, I think they're realistic timescales. We absolutely understand the importance of getting this service right. This is a vital service that impacts on every single household in a city of over 1 million people. So we absolutely want to ensure that we get this right, we get the right partner in at the next stage to work with us, work with other partners on Birmingham Highways Limited, and ensure that we take the PFI to that is absolutely vital. There's no two ways. If we were to drop this PFI, we will not be getting the level of funding that we are getting because of the PFI from central government. So we're realistic about those timescales, and we hope, in fact, we will achieve those. And absolutely to kind of really achieve those timescales, working alongside our partners at Birmingham Highways Limited. Thank you very much. The Chair said we agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.2. Agree. Thank you. 16 highway network extension. Thanks. So one of the key issues we had with our previous partner was the council did not understand or have the extensive information about the accuracy of the state of our highway network. So this report is absolutely important to ensuring that we've got the right level of mechanisms in place to improve the accuracy of the highway maintenance public expense network. So this report seeks to transfer resources allocated to the revenue implications changes in HM to the highway maintenance budget. The improved accuracy will have a variety of important benefits, including the council will have obviously clear record, a more accurate record of the highway in our city, a better understanding of how to mitigate the implications of any claims against the council to maintain such areas, and then reduce time, cost, and delay dealing with such corrections in the future. So I think this is a really welcome report, and we'll ensure that we have the right level of accuracy of information available to hold and work with our partners, to hold our partners to account, to work with them, as well as service the city. Thank you. Thank you. Robert.
Thank you. If I understood this right, is bringing in some land that wasn't previously considered to be maintained at public expense into being maintained by council. So, because it isn't in the report, could we get a map emailed around to members of what areas are coming in to be maintained at public expense?
So, yes. Sorry, John.
That was my question anyway.
That was your question? Yes. Okay, in which case, can we agree recommendations 2, 1, 2, 2? Approve. 17 is the road and improvement budget, transport and highways. Steve?
Thanks, Ian. The local improvement budget seeks to address minor transport issues that are identified at the ward and are typically not able to be delivered as they do not comply with the transport highway programs. The fund is part of a moving plan. We've got local engineers working with local members in the localities looking at identifying some of those things. Some of these have been raised previously by members of local communities. Resource allocation to so these are schemes which will be up to £50,000 in value, aligned with common schemes, so road traffic calming measures, vehicle activation, speed signs, look at implementing and delivering traffic regulation orders, grass protection measures, and other physical restraints like bollards and fountains. The deliverables will not impact on some of our key targets around delivering the convoy gains and ensuring that we've got some of the highway projects that I mentioned on the previous reports we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert.
Thank you. Hopefully just a quick one. I couldn't see it in black and white in this. So can you just clarify, is it going to be administered in the same way as the current local budget? So each ward gets a set amount and the members sort it out, or is this a bidding into the centre scheme?
No. Thank you. Yes, I wanted more information about how it relates to the existing ward budgets for highways and roads. This is a new fund on top of it. I noticed the cabinet member referred to projects of up to £50,000, which the budget of the million would only allow 20 of those, which is not one project per ward unless they're joint ward budgets. So is this a top-up on ward highways budget, or is it a replacement for it? Will it increase resources available to wards? And just picking up the conversations we had previously around the clean air zone funding, is this a replacement for highways improvement fund coming out of the clean air zone funding, or is that still a possibility?
Thank you.
So this has nothing, this project has no impact on the worldwide funds. This is actually separate bidding processes where local members and local communities are working with local engineers to identify some of those projects which can't be bid because there's enough resources in those localities within the important projects. It is a central decision-making process where the decision-making will sit with the system director for transport activity, the system director for highways, each partnership, and while in consultation with myself. But local engineers have identified a number of these projects. The projects have been identified by communities and local councillors for a long time. This is not a replacement of the project that we previously discussed utilising council revenue funding. We are looking to bring that forward in the next few months. Work is taking place on how we can pull that together. That project obviously will look at how we can improve air quality and we can improve public transport in localities too, so that there will be the details of that will come forward in the next few months, hopefully in spring 2022. Thanks.
Okay, John.
So a further clarification on that. From what you say, it sounds like there's already a list of projects that have been aligned to this funding. Is that correct? And if so, can it be shared with members?
It can absolutely be shared with members. Local engineers and local members often come to myself and the officers with projects that are absolutely required in localities, but there's no resource for it. So there has been some work taking place that local engineers have been leading on, and they will submit this. I'm more than happy for those projects to be the list of projects to be shared with the colleagues.
Okay, so another question. Robert.
Sorry, thank you. Just to clarify, so welcome the commitment to share the list and approved. Are we saying they already have been approved? This is in effect approving those projects. Are we saying wards can bid in and that process is still to take place, this election?
So no funding has been allocated for any of these projects.
What I'm saying is I know that if you speak to the local engineers,
Yeah.
they will have a list of projects that local members have identified, local communities have identified that will fit into this. But there's nothing stopping any member or any section of Birmingham putting a project forward. All I'm encouraging is people work with local engineers as a protocol and to see where we can allocate those resources. But it's absolutely key that we get this funding spread right across the city. I know it's £1 million and there's a value up to £50,000. I think there'll be many projects that will be funded which will cost less than £50,000. So there will be definitely more than 20 projects that we can support.
Thank you. Rich James on this. So can we agree with recommendations 2, 1, 2, 5, so 3? Thank you. The final transport one today is Metro Centennial Square Extension, UBSF, EZ, additional funding.
Thanks, Ian. I'm going to take this report as read. Clearly, this project was delivered back in March 2018. The funding was approved back then too, and there was just some cash flow scenario where the left agreed to give the funding to the council in 2021 for us to repay transport bus because we're paying that this piece of work. Okay, so there's a variation in the needs to add this additional money on top of the maybe 16 million that the left have given us previously. Just agreeing to taking this money from the left to pay transport bus to build the piece of work.
Thank you. And just to add to that, part of the reason for this increase in cost is the City Council increasing the quality of the materials that are going to be used or have been used in fact on this particular extension above and beyond what was agreed in the planning consent. So I think this is good news that we're going to have a look at the Metro Stock Institute where you can see the quality of those materials coming through in what is now a world-class square. There are no comments. Can we agree recommendations 2, 1, 2, 4? Agree? Thank you. 19 then. BCC Day Opportunity Services update 2021. Comment.
Thank you, Leader. Too many earrings and what else. Right, this report provides Cabinet with an update on the phased reopening of our day opportunity services following the government's guideline, which we received in March 2020, on the need to close all our services due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The report sets out some of the feedback that we've had from our citizens, carers, and their family on how our services and users have been supported. What I'm asking Cabinet to do today is to approve the commissioning of a co-production partner to support the delivery of a review of our day opportunity services in light of the pandemic and any lasting impact that it may have. And following on from that, this will be presented back to Cabinet in July next year, setting out the proposals that will be described on what to review and to co-produce any services going forward, and also the timescales that this will be done. What I'd like to draw your attention to is the work that we've been doing since the lockdown. I have been absolutely blown over by what staff have been able to do during the period of the lockdown from March 2020 to March 2021. I'm going to highlight 4 areas that I was just really pleased about. We made over 56,000 phone calls. We also contacted online contacts. We've had over 21,000. We visited over 15,400 people in their gardens. We did garden visits and we did shopping trips for 2,452. But the one that I'd like to also identify is the activity packs that we were able to get out there, which was over 28,000. What that I'm hoping is showing you that even though our building-based services were not open, we have managed during the pandemic to reach an awful lot of people and maintain a really good service, even though it's been in a different way. What we're hoping is going forward that co-production will be key. And I'm keen for us to do this in partnership, not just with our citizens, but with our families, the carers and providers, as they are key to the lived experience of their opportunities and the provision that's given. I'm going to hand back to the leader and ask, are there any questions? And I will try my best to answer them.
Thanks very much, Paula. We do have a question, Paula.
Thank you. I suppose it's more of a request than a question. When that piece of work is done about sort of what it's going to look like going forward, I just ask that we don't place too much emphasis on reduced use during the pandemic, because clearly there will be health reasons why some of the people who would otherwise use it haven't been able to go there. And I know, when you speak to guests, how valuable ability to access respite is. So I just wouldn't want us to rush to overly changing the service if actually once the pandemic is over, there will be an uptick again. Thank you.
Can I just say, the thing that I value most is co-production. We'll be working with families, carers, other providers, as well as the staff. We will do nothing in isolation. What we will do as a service is ensure that we are talking to people, we get a service going forward that is fit for purpose, that people agree with. I'm not going to lie, we are going to get some people that don't want any change whatsoever. But the bulk of our citizens at the moment, they want a voice. And what we're trying to do over the next year is ensure that we give the majority or everybody a voice, which at the moment, a few are speaking for the many. We want the many's voice to be heard. And this is why we want to bring the company in. We want to ensure that we're getting out there and we're doing this co-production so that when we come back to you in July, you know it's been done in such a way that we have got overall agreements with what we're trying to do. It isn't what myself wants or what the team wants, John Williams, Graham Betts, what have you. It's about what the public are saying they want and how we can shape the service going forward to suit the public and the needs of our citizens in the 21st century. Because, you know, the last year, you may disagree, and I'm sorry, leader, but I'm passionate about this. But COVID has absolutely changed the way people think about how they receive services. Thank you. Thank you, leader.
Thanks very much, Paulette. Can we agree that recommendations 2.1 to 2.13? Agree. Thank you. Item 20 is Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme and Afghan Relocation and Assistance Policy. Birmingham Pledge. John.
Thank you. I'm proud actually to be presenting this report to Cabinet today. I think it stands up, of course, we're in our commitment to be a city of sanctuary and provide a safe haven for people who are fleeing war and persecution in this world. And I don't think anyone who watched what happened in Afghanistan since the summer could be in any doubt of the mortal danger that the seven people are facing as a result of the Taliban regime. Those who work with the UK coalition forces, those who stood up for democracy, those who stood up for women's rights and freedom of speech, and is a very real threat to women and girls and to the LGBT plus community and religious minorities. So that is going to be why Birmingham won't stand by and is participating in this resettlement scheme. Here we approved an offer to welcome 80 individuals onto the Afghan relocation policy. These are the interpreters and others who will be working with UK courses and needing our help to relocate. The offer that we're putting forward under the second round of the scheme is to welcome a further 110 Afghan citizens in 2022 to 23, and again in 2023 to 24. If the government then chooses to continue the scheme after that date and the associated funding supports, the report will seek to delegate authority to the Cabinet member and the Strategic Director to decide whether to continue to participate at that rate for a further 2 years. Under this proposal, we will receive around £1.59 million from the government to provide support to individuals arriving by these schemes for their first year's residence in the UK. That funding covers £20,500 per person for councils to provide integration support, additional per person funding for e-sign education, access to a national housing fund if families are personally affected by the benefit cap, and £2,600 per person for the NHS clinical commissioning groups. Housing will be secured from within the private rented sector, and drawing upon a very extensive network of expertise and support that we've built in the city for our participation in previously settlement schemes, and of course the ongoing work that we do with our partners to support refugees and migrants in Birmingham. And we've got some really experts and some really exemplars, frankly, working in this area of Birmingham, which I think again underscores our commitment to being a true city of sanctuary. I'd just like to say at this point a thank you to them and to our partners in the wider Birmingham City of Sanctuary movement for all that they're doing and that they will be doing to welcome our new Afghan brother friends to Birmingham. So approving this decision today means we're honouring our national debt, frankly, to those who work with us in Afghanistan and those people who desperately need our help. It's absolutely the right thing to do, and I'm going to follow. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ian. And as we welcomed the support that we gave to the Afghan interpreters, we sort of welcome the support that's been given here. Thanks very much for what you said at the beginning. I was just wondering, the people that we'll be giving support to here, were these people who gave us aid or something, or helped our troops when we were there, or they just citizens that we've asked for? I just want to sort of bit on their background, really, to work was. And also, with an eye on some of the comments that have been made since we accept the interpreters, etc., what sort of number are we accepting compared to other councils when you sort of take into account our population and that of other councils as well?
Some councils, of course, don't take money.
Well, I think that's what I was getting at.
John.
Yeah, thank you for your support on that. But I think we can be very proud of the fact that the City of Sanctuary commitment has been cross-party in the city and continues to be so. The people who are accommodating through this scheme, it's a combination, so it's people who come forward, so we'll have private citizens who are fleeing persecution essentially, and also people who have been working with UK forces and supporting the former civilian government there. And as William has already pointed out, yes, there are a number of promises, of course, you don't participate in asylum relocation more broadly. I think what we're doing is comparable to what the stats of the cities are taking. We certainly look very carefully at what we think we can, the support we can deliver. We've got a very extensive voluntary sector network in the city. But of course, we also, in addition to work we do through executive schemes like this, we accommodate a very high number of people who seek asylum for the wider system as well. It's what we're very happy to do. But of course, that does then create pressures in terms of the support that we're able to provide. So I think what we've got here is a sustainable package that ensures we welcome those people well and ensure that they settle and make their lives here.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Very happy to support this, which is very, very necessary, particularly after what happened in Afghanistan. Just one question. The report says that funding will be provided for 3 years, whereas previous projects of this kind have been funded for 5 years. Do you know if 3 years is a feasible period to manage support, or would it be necessary to review support for these people after 3 years to ensure that they are managing okay?
John.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question. Obviously, we have to work with the schemes that's presented to us, but we've continually made points around the need to properly resource resettlement scheme, and we will continue to do that. Again, we've scoped out looking at resources available to ensure that the number that we're offering is sustainable to provide that support. But I think undoubtedly there's certainly more that we can do, not just for this cohort, but in terms of the wider asylum system as well.
Thank you. In which case, then we agree recommendations 21426. Thank you. Item 21 is homelessness prevention and reduction of grant funding for vulnerable renters. Councillor Sharon Thompson will probably with us, so I'll briefly present this. The Council's allocation of the grant for vulnerable renters was confirmed by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities back on the 27th of October this year to be spent in this financial year. And from the total of 65 million, Birmingham City Council will receive 1.5 million. Funding is to meet the costs arising from the needs of those at risk of homelessness and the ongoing housing crisis as a result of the pandemic. In writing to local authorities, Penny Hogman, the Director of Homelessness and Sleeping at DLUHC, stated that the purpose of this exceptional one-off payment is to support low-income private renters with COVID-19 related rental arrears to avoid eviction or find a new home where necessary in order to prevent homelessness, with local authorities and time funding to those who need it most and help them get back on their feet. They also set out that the department does not expect this funding to be spent on temporary accommodation costs. So in order to design the process and ensure the effective partnership around the delivery of this grant, officers have consulted with a range of public and private sector partners, and they are listed in paragraph 5.1. Obviously, we now need to get on with the task of spending this grant to best effect in the remainder of this financial year. Are there any questions on the topic?
Yeah, thank you. Just to very much welcome the funding that's been given to the city, and I think that point you mentioned there about it's not for spending on in terms of accommodation, it's about actually preventing people getting into that situation in the first place. And so should be very welcomed. And obviously, if there's anything we can do from our side to help the council make sure it's spent for those who need it, more than happy.
Yeah, thank you also, lot, Ms. Willie. And I think Birmingham has been very successful in preventing homelessness over recent years, something that was recognised in a call with the Minister last week. So very good space. So can we agree with recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? So agree. Thank you. 22, plan procurement activities January to March of next year, and the quarterly contract award schedule for July to September this year. Tristan.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This is the standard report, only 3 items this time on the PBAR, but of course happy to take questions.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Your opening comment there, Kristen, is one of the ones I wanted to flag. You say there's only 3 items on it, but when you go to the exempt appendix, it lists a 4th item, which isn't listed on the public, and that's not meant to take place. You're meant to list what it is on the public, and then you just have the figure on the private. So there's a problem with the report there. If we can get some explanation, 1 as to what's happened there, and 2 is if that procurement's actually allowed to go ahead if it hasn't been listed on the public as well.
Human error, I suspect.
Probably. And then the other one relates to the 3rd item on the list, the control centre CCTV cameras. The figure that's listed on the exempt report, which is actually on the public section of the earlier report, so it kind of didn't need to be an exempt report, doesn't seem to include the 4 additional cameras for Southside bid, given the value it's against it compared to the value on the earlier public report. So can someone just explain what's happening with the procurement of those ones for Southside? Are they not being done at the same time as this?
Thank you. Obviously, it's very detailed reading of the report.
We always read everything in detail.
It's a good spot. I didn't spot that before. I think it's probably explained by the fact that items do drop in and drop out of the PBAR as it goes through the process of being instructed. I suspect it's just one that's dropped out and will appear later.
Do you want to read out what the title is?
The additional one is, it is telecare services.
Telecare services.
Presumably from a legal standpoint, we're okay with it.
Yeah. Now you've read out that title. That should cover us.
So I'm trying to think if we can read out what would be in the public domain if we got it right, that would be okay. So any information.
Sorry, can't hear.
Sorry, I've got my list on. If we can just read out what would be in the public domain, so today the name and contacts and any other information in the chapter, that would be in the public domain. We can share that with the public.
Well, the line that's dropped into the exempt appendix is simply strategy award amendment, telecare services and the value associated with that.
So I think the other bit you normally have in the public, which is further on in the report, is the number of years, and it says 4 years, so I'm assuming I'm trying to say that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Further point, Kristen?
With on the CCTV, can I bring Rob in on that? That's okay.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. So just on CCTV, the plan procurement reflects the finance report that went previously on last month. So clearly we will have to add to that report the additional cameras that have been approved today.
So will that be a further procurement, or will this procurement
will be the same?
Right, so this will be changed before it actually.
Now that we've got just approved today, in that, add to that.
Right, okay. I see. So it would be better if that means where
We can add an amendment note, and we can insert an amendment note into the next, we have done it before. Okay. So we can add an amendment note into next month's PKR just to cover that. Governance.
To be agree, I mean, we wouldn't object to noting that.
Very good. So we'll note that then. Can we agree recommendation 2.1.3? Agree? Article 23, which is for noting decision and notice in respect of the use of household support fund for children eligible for free school meals. We're asked to note that on the 22nd of November, Chief Executive took the urgent decision to approve free school meal vouchers in order that they could be ordered for the Christmas holiday period for those families that are eligible. Can we note that as well?
Yeah, just say we supported that on the chief executive. So
Yeah, just email around
that's
the three leaders for agreement. Okay, we should note that then. Thank you very much. At which point we need to go back to items 11 and 12. What I'm going to suggest is that we go into private session in order that we can answer the question the council all wishes to ask, and we'll come back into public to present the report and hopefully agreement. So can we turn the, sorry, Suzanne?
Will you take the public question?